Hot button.
And blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Because I think
Yeah, I got it in outline form.
we're getting professional. AF.
All right, here we
Hell
go.
yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Hot Button, where today I'm going to put my feet up and hand our storytelling duties over to our friend and fellow tech guru, Austin Blakesley.
Yeah.
Where he is going to enlighten us with the tale of how everybody's favorite oversized green home console, the OG
Y-Box.
Xbox, came to be. Along with how Microsoft in general got serious into the gaming space, pretty much completely revolutionizing the way that we all play video games today, even regardless of where you're doing it. I'm co-host Randall Beatrice, and I'm here with the always funny Chris Antuano.
Yeah, I'm always funny. You heard it here
Always
first.
fun. No pressure at all. All right, Austin, why don't you take the reins? I'm going to have a drink.
Okay. So, question for you guys. What
Yeah.
do porn, Disney's The Lion King, and 9/11 have in common?
Wait. I've seen all of them.
I've jerked off to all of them.
So,
Were we close?
no. They all more or less had a hand in determining the Xbox, the original Xbox's fate.
Wait, you're telling me the media terrorist attack of Disney had something to do with the creation of
Yes.
Xbox?
We'll get to that one first. Okay, so you can't really tell the story of the Xbox without telling where the X came from, which is DirectX, which we've probably all heard and been annoyed by because every time that you download a game
update,
on
yeah.
Steam, you have to update DirectX.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know what it is, but I know that if my computer tells me
Okay.
to do it, I do it.
I don't know what it is, but I hate it.
So back in the early 90s, when we were all born, there was a...
I was born in '89, sir.
whatever.
Ugh.
My pop filter's falling. So there were two Microsoft operating systems. There was Windows and then there was DOS.
Yes.
DOS standing for Disk Operating System. Microsoft DOS was the one that had a command line and there was no graphical user interface, no mouse or anything like that.
It was what, just for like, I
You
guess
just
like,
type commands
That's
like
how you
run.
played Zork, right?
Yeah, things like that. So, gaming in that time, PC gaming specifically, was a very nerdy hobby. You had to know a lot to get a game to run on DOS. You had to know the right commands to execute, and if there was a problem, you had to know a lot of programming shit to fix it.
Jeez, what a fun
of
time
dorks,
that
am I
must have
right?
been.
Yeah. So, Microsoft, with the launch of the original couple Sega and Nintendo platforms, Microsoft noticed that there was some money in video games.
Yeah. Well,
so-
this blue rat, guys. People seem to be liking those coins. We should get in on this.
So Microsoft wanted to turn gaming into a more user-friendly experience. So they wanted to turn Windows 95 into the first user-friendly PC gaming operating system.
I do remember when I was a
That's
kid
bold.
seeing a lot of game boxes featuring like the Windows 95
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
But they had a problem. At the time, developers really liked DOS because DOS had no security in place at all. Windows, I won't get into it, but Windows ran something called a protected memory model, which is basically you don't have direct access to any of the computer parts. You have to go through Windows. The problem with that is that game development requires direct access to a
Yeah.
lot of your computer parts because it needs to be as fast as possible to get the games to run.
Yeah,
So
makes sense.
they put something in Windows 95 called WinG to try to entice people to develop games. Try and make it easier to develop games, to try to give people access. It was basically a set of graphics drivers for Windows that were meant to run like DOS, and they did not at all.
Now, DOS had no graphic thing whatsoever. Everything was text-based, or you could.
There was no operating system, really. You were directly
Yeah.
talking to the computer.
Oh, okay. So you could make like visuals
I mean, is
and
that
stuff.
is that why developers weren't a fan of WinG because it was so different from DOS, or just
It didn't work, and we'll get to that. So
that's a good reason? I'd say.
when Microsoft released WinG to a bunch of people and were like, "Hey, make your games for Windows 95," a lot of developers were like, "Nah, I'm good," and they kept making games for DOS, which was a huge problem for Windows. The first game that said okay was the Lion King game, which also released on the Super Nintendo
And the Genesis,
Genesis.
Bullshit game.
Bullshit
Fucking
game. Very
impossible.
hard.
Yeah.
Like every one of those like,
lot of us-
movie
Yeah,
games,
It's because
impossible
they hated
to play.
kids.
Yeah.
Like they really did.
A lot of us probably played this Lion King game. Probably played it on our Super Nintendos or Genesises. But the company Compaq, remember Compaq? No longer a company.
Compaq, yeah.
They made computers, and they made a bunch of computers for the launch of Windows 95. And in order to entice people with this gaming initiative, they bundled in the Lion King. With
Wow, that was a
it
pack-in
was bundled
title?
in. It was a
Wii Sports shit.
an
Yeah, even
agreement-
back then.
an agreement between Compaq and Disney. Microsoft had nothing to do with this agreement. So they got the game running on their computers, but then the people at Compaq developed a bunch of graphics drivers that were supposed to talk to this WinG program. Did not work. And it turned out that everybody that tried to play The Lion King on their new Compaq computers instantly crashed.
Like as soon as you opened it.
Yeah, and it turned out that
Suck it, kids.
there was a lot of work that you had to do to get Lion King running on your new Compaq.
Which,
A
as
lot-
you know, fans of The Lion King
Yeah.
also have advanced computer
Yeah.
knowledge.
It turned out that there was a lot more work needed to do than to get the game to run on DOS.
Whoops.
Which was
Mom,
the
my
exact,
game won't work. Well, what you need to do, son,
lot of
is
Christmas
open up
mornings.
DOS and yeah, it's like
yeah. You need to go into your registry and edit the So essentially, Microsoft noticed that this was a big problem, right?
yeah, only if Santa Claus gave him a YouTube tutorial where
Yeah.
they're like, "Hey, here's how you run Lion King on DOS."
Drunk dads
They
like putting a
finally-
toy together.
They finally got a developer to agree to use this WinG shit, and it did not work. So 3 people, Craig Eisler, Alex St. John, and Eric Engstrom, 3 engineers at Microsoft who were passionate about gaming, specifically PC gaming, decided that this needed to be fixed. So they developed a set of graphics drivers that were meant to make every single computer with every single graphics card work with every single game.
It's a smart idea.
And they called the thing DirectX.
Yes.
Nice.
DirectX. The X in it is not, in typical 90s fashion, stand for extreme. It is actually a programming joke because X is a variable that you commonly use.
Right.
So the
I know
opposite
math.
of people who use the word extreme
Yes, exactly.
with an X.
So the X is meant to stand in for a lot of things because DirectX was a collection of drivers, one for audio, one for 3D graphics, one for 2D graphics,
Right.
one for drawing. So Direct Draw, Direct 3D, Direct 2D, Direct Music, Direct
My
Audio.
mom probably used some of these programs
Yeah.
back in the day.
So Windows launched in the end of 1994. DirectX launched in the end of 1995.
Right. And we're up to DirectX 12 now,
Okay.
right?
So
Was it-
yeah, so DirectX launched. DirectX launched in 95, and up until about 2001, it had a version every year. So
Right.
DirectX 1,
Jeez.
96 was DirectX 2, 97 DirectX 3, blah, blah, blah. Up until DirectX 9, when they finally got it right and decided to stop releasing
ninth
versions
time's
every
the
year.
charm.
Yeah.
Little side note, DirectX 8 was the one that ran on Xbox, the original Xbox.
Oh.
DirectX 9 was the one that ran on 360.
60.
And I believe DirectX 11 is the one that powers the Xbox One.
Not
Now,
12.
now when
No,
9
that's
came out, could you finally play The Lion King on your computer?
I think people were past that at that point.
Oh, okay.
They moved on to the Lion
Yeah,
King
they
2
were on-
or 3. Or,
2.5.
Do you
I
think
think.
there's
right.
an Xbox One X Lion King game that runs like...
it's not on Game
Okay.
Pass as far as I know.
So Microsoft got really big into this PC gaming initiative, so much so that they started Microsoft Game Studios,
Right.
which we still know to this day. They make
Never heard of them.
They're not called. They're just called Microsoft Studios now.
I don't know.
I don't think
I don't think
game
there's a
part
game in
is-
there.
Microsoft
yeah.
Game Studios is the one that you might have seen at the beginning of Halo or Fable or any of the
Yes.
Forza games.
There's a little paint splash thing, right? We
Yeah,
have-
yeah.
When they first started, their only successful game was Microsoft Flight Simulator, which was kind of antithetical to the whole
That predated
we want
Age of
gaming to be
Empires,
cool
huh?
thing because
Okay.
nobody cool plays a flight simulator.
My brother played.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
exactly.
whoa, hold on.
So-
I love flying games.
They were a very small part of
Wait,
my
does that have to do with 9/11? Is that the connection?
they were a very small part of Microsoft until 1997 when Ed Freeze, head of the Microsoft Game Studios at the time, commissioned a little game called Age of Empires, which you
yeah.
might have heard of. That game made
2 is dope.
Love
that
some
game made
Age
a
of
ton of
Empires.
profits, and those profits prompted Microsoft to staff up and fund Microsoft Game Studios.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Good in many ways.
So at the time, the PlayStation 1 was a big thing. PlayStation 2, obviously not announced yet, But
PlayStation 1 was killer.
PlayStation 1 had gained on its first outing. Sony had gained 47% of the console market space.
Crazy.
Yes.
I know that is insane.
Like assuming
dude.
Nintendo
That
was
little
the previous majority
griddle.
holder in that, along with
Yeah.
Sega, but
Sega and Nintendo had a little over half, and Sony had the other half.
I
this
know,
is
it's wild.
pre-Dreamcast as
Yes.
well, right?
Yeah,
This-
it's a
this
little
was- this
griddle
was-
where you put a disc in it. Who wouldn't want that?
This was Genesis
Listen,
and Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 and I believe Sega CD. Which is probably
Sega CD is
which is
probably
probably
the
where that market share came from, because I assume Sega CD probably had.
I know
like
the N64 was not
10%.
as large as
Yeah.
success as the
So,
SNES,
the DirectX team noted this and made an internal document called "Taking Fun Seriously." another great programmer name for something. And in this, the team noted that PlayStation, having 47% of the market share, didn't actually make a lot of their own games.
So for sure, I just want to touch on
Yeah.
this real quick. We were talking the other day about that PlayStation Mini that got announced.
Yeah.
And a lot of the games that everybody is like requesting on that thing are all pretty much third party.
Yeah.
Resident Evil, Tony Hawk, Metal Gear Solid. Like they'd have to go through Capcom and Konami and Square Enix, and I mean, I guess they went through them for Final Fantasy, which is on there. But like all their biggest mascots at the time, like Crash, Spyro, all that stuff, like they weren't theirs.
Yeah,
Same with Rayman. Like,
Honestly,
all
to be honest, I can't think of a single one like off the top of my head.
Twisted Metal, I know, was Sony.
Okay,
But
yeah.
I know, but like at the time, yeah, it's like
Ape
like
Escape also.
Ape Escape
Sony.
was them. That is
Medieval
true.
was Sony.
Medieval
And the crossover of Ape Escape and Twisted Metal.
But
Yeah.
Oh wait, that was just in my
they're
dreams.
they're gonna have to go through all these deals with Activision, Ubisoft, and everybody just to make that thing what everybody wants it to be.
Yeah.
Like, and that's gotta be a lot of work. As opposed to Nintendo, who can pretty much just release whatever non-rare thing they
Advantage, yeah.
want on
But
their
think
backlog. Like, of course, they don't choose to do that for whatever reason, whatever.
But that's
still.
commonplace now, right? I mean, it's more commonplace for a third party
Yeah.
to develop
Yeah,
a game.
now
than it is
it's
to
very
come.
true.
So the thing is, these developers, they noticed that they relied a lot on third-party developers. And the Microsoft people, smartly, the DirectX team thought, all we got to do is make something dope.
Yeah.
Something that's easy to develop for, and all these developers will flock to us.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course,
yeah.
though, in typical programmer fashion, that's a running theme, by the way. Programmers not understanding how normal people act.
Oh yeah.
They thought that this platform could be the PC. They
It's
thought,
like it's like a triangle. It's like talk to a woman, talk to a computer.
Yeah.
There's no. It's not a triangle.
Wait, what's the what's the other point?
it's just a line.
it's just a lot. You pick one side.
So they thought they could get kids to stop playing their PlayStation and play their computers. Which,
Fat chance.
no.
yeah, I know.
But this was also part of the move to get DirectX involved, because at the time DirectX was picking up steam. But like I said, DirectX didn't really become a thing until DirectX 9, which is around 2002 or 3. Which you'll notice now, looking back, that's when PC gaming really picked up.
That's very true.
Yeah.
But
PC gaming was like a joke for a
but
couple of years.
they threw some 90s ass fucking parties trying to
All
get
right,
this fucking.
I saw it. I really want to know about these parties.
Okay.
I really want to
So
know.
the first party they threw was at a programmer convention. They threw a Roman themed party with actual fucking lions.
What? Oh my god!
wait, what are these
hold
parties
on.
for?
Lion King game.
Hold
What are
on.
these parties for?
Slave girls.
Oh my
and a
fucking
Playboy
God.
bunny auction.
Wait, do they have togas and stuff?
Yes,
Yeah, okay,
togas
hold on.
and-
God.
Wait, you're telling me game programmers and developers have a chance to win an like a date or something with a
Yeah.
Playboy bunny?
Yes.
Oh my god.
This was
God
at like SIGGRAPH or some like computer architecture convention or some
God
shit.
bless
But
that
this-
woman's soul. Like,
this
could you
was-
imagine? Like, all right, it's like,
my
like,
God.
all right, well, start the bidding at 500, and then it's just like, any takers? Yeah, and then some guy gets it, and then he's just like,
be a
well,
fly on the
DirectX
wall.
9 is right around the corner. She's
Yeah.
like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Fly on the wall. One of those
So
parties.
this was all to sell developers on DirectX.
and apparently it worked, right?
It worked.
Yeah.
But Alex St. John was the head of the department, and he was the one throwing these parties. He was eventually fired for trying to buy a $2 million fake alien spaceship as a part of these parties. And when he was criticized for this decision, he was quoted as telling his colleagues to fuck off.
Dude, it's great. He's like, you kidding me? Last time I got titties and lions. That's what they want. Now I'm trying to get a fake alien spaceship, and fuck you.
That's a bold, yeah, just
but-
statement.
so these-
Suck
these-
my dick. How's that for a quote?
These parties worked, but DirectX was adopted. Like I said, not as heavily till 9 came out, but
Right.
it was a hit. And But they realized that the developers that programmed these games on the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64 did not want to come to PC. At the time, PC was thought of as kind of the Wii was. It was like a secondary market. It was for shovelware,
Right, yeah.
and it was rampant with fucking piracy. So nobody
Yeah.
wanted to put their game on, because Windows was not nearly as protected at the time. So nobody wanted to put their
Yeah.
game on Windows because, like, there's so much piracy, and
How would you make any money off
you
of
would
it?
have to be the first one to
Well,
be a
that-
hit on computer.
That reminds me how.
Well, what about
how,
Half-Life?
like,
Half-Life came out back then.
that was
that was
right after
97,
That
yeah.
was yeah.
or 98. Sorry, 98.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because it reminds me of how scared a lot of Japanese game companies were of the internet back in the day and of piracy. Like, it's like, especially, like, not just from players, but even from, like, online
Yeah.
publications and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
So,
Which like what
was
like
real
like
crazy.
you said, like Half-Life was like the one that was like, now we're gonna release on PC, and it
Yeah.
worked
Yeah,
because
it
now
did.
Steam's the biggest thing in the world. Like,
Yeah.
so
though
they got in on.
Half-Life did also have a home version on PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Great game. Great port.
So Microsoft started to realize that if they wanted to steal this market from Sony, they needed to be in the console space.
Yeah, so
But in-
Even today, very important.
In
Yeah.
typical greedy businessman fashion, they didn't think about making their own console at first.
No, they thought about inviting lions to a dinner party.
they thought about inserting themselves into the existing players.
Right.
So at the time, Bill Gates met with CEO, and I apologize for this name because I'm going to butcher it.
No, I do that all the time.
Nobuyuki Ide, I think,
Okay.
was the CEO of Sony at the time. He met with him, and he said,
Now, he-
hey, look, can you use our Microsoft development tools and development platform as a basis for your next PlayStation? And the guy said, no thanks.
yeah.
Now this was years after their previous attempt to partnership with Nintendo as well.
Yeah.
Like I don't think Sony got dicked over by Nintendo, so I don't think they were in a
They
position to wanna...
they also partnered with the Dreamcast, and it was in there.
Wow, really?
Dreamcast boxes had the Windows logo on them. I don't know if you
Oh my
remember
God,
that.
I kinda
But
do remember
but that
that.
kind of went nowhere, obviously.
That
'cause the
CEO
Dreamcast
of
was
Sony,
out.
by the way, he was there for a while.
Yeah.
Till the middle of like the PS3's run. I
Yeah.
think. Like, he's like a
But-
director at,
but at-
General Motors and
At
Nestle or
at
something.
that time, he kind of like he was not part of the PlayStation thing,
Right.
Because it wasn't until the PlayStation 3 that like the CEO of Sony cared about PlayStation,
Right, because they cared about TVs and
yeah,
not
yeah.
Walkmans. What was this? The Discman at the time.
But so he was quoted as saying, "With Microsoft, open architecture means Microsoft's architecture," which is a reference to Microsoft's partnership with IBM. Microsoft partnered with IBM in the early 90s, late 80s, and there's a reason why you don't hear about IBM anymore, and Microsoft's one of the biggest companies in the world because they kind of dicked them over. So,
But
Gotta get
IBM's
out
still
on time.
around, though.
yeah,
I mean,
they are, but
So they got to be doing something besides
Yeah.
making that smart ass robot.
yeah, that one that plays chess.
yeah.
Okay,
Wait, did they make Deep Blue?
Yo,
Yeah.
shout
Oh,
out
wow.
to Watson.
no, they didn't make Deep Blue. Watson.
Watson.
Oh, Watson. Is Watson smarter than
Watson,
Deep
if
Yes.
you're listening, I know you are. All right, that's all.
Blue? Knight to
Okay,
E6.
so
Deep Blue's a cooler
It
name.
was right after this. Oh, Microsoft. Bill Gates took this very personally, and
That he wouldn't accept?
He was very angry.
Wow.
So that revenge against the Sony
Is what
CEO
gave him the
is
fuel
kind of
to,
what
like-
gave him the fuel to be like. Later on, when we realized when they make some mistakes and they're like, we might lose some money. Bill Gates was just like red in the face. He's just like white, blinding rage vision. He's like, fucking finish it. I want to
When
bury
you see
these gems.
Fusion Frenzy, you'll all know.
Yeah. So. Sony announced shortly after Sony announced the PlayStation 2, March 2nd, 1999.
Yeah, was that like a pre-E3 event? Or
Yes,
something like
and
that?
I think it was GDC.
Oh,
It was in
GDC?
March.
Okay.
Yeah. So the console was announced with a lot of multimedia features, too.
Which was huge for the PS2.
Yes,
The
which it
DVD,
was.
the,
DVD
like,
player,
thing,
music player, blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
yeah, yeah.
That's why my
3DO CEO Trip Hawkins was quoted as saying, "This console's a Trojan horse. It's meant to enter the home as a games machine and then take over the entertainment center."
Jeez,
Well, but
aggressive.
that's a very modern thing.
And-
Opposed to Xboxes, it's supposed to, it's a Trojan horse in the sense that it goes into your living room and literally unleashes soldiers into your house.
I mean, this. You also said this is the CEO of 3DO. We all know how that worked out for him.
Yeah.
So.
All
those multimedia consoles
they'll
in the
come up
90s.
later. Andrew House, then marketing director for Sony. Recently, he was in the lead of the PlayStation thing. I think he quit recently, but then he was just marketing director, and he was quoted as saying, "If this is just a games console, then we have failed." So now Microsoft was not only worried that Sony was going to capitalize this market that they wanted a piece of, they were worried that they were going to cut into the Windows market with the whole multimedia thing. So Bill Gates had a company retreat.
Where was this?
I don't know. Probably somewhere fancy. They had lot
A
of
gladiator
money.
arena.
Yeah. inside that $2 billion alien spaceship. So he wanted to discuss the two sides of the business: productivity and entertainment. Productivity being office and
Paint.
paint.
Paint. That's
And
where
then
they,
entertainment. being,
nobody knows that. That's where they made all their money. is paint.
Windows Movie Maker and all that
Space
shit.
Cadet table. I
But
think that was Maxis that made that.
but this meeting is
That
important.
ping pong game, not ping pong. That
Hover.
Space
hover-
pinball.
space pinball
That's
game.
right, it's a Space Cadet table.
Oh, that's what it's
yeah,
called.
yeah,
Okay.
and Maxis made that.
Nice.
Like the Sims team.
So this is where it was decided that that
Great
gaming
game.
was going to be big, and that Microsoft needed an answer to the PlayStation. They needed something.
Bill Gates still angry.
And at this point, he was not just like, we need to get into this market. He was like, these guys are gonna fuck us.
They're
We need
gonna-
to- yeah.
Yeah, I mean the dude's he's a tech billionaire and he's smart. Like he can obviously has
Yeah,
the
yeah.
foresight to see what
Bill
gaming's
Gates-
going
It's
to
true.
become.
Bill Gates
You know.
is very smart.
Yeah, like if you didn't have the foresight as his position to see that gaming was going to become
So-
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Microsoft decided, okay, we need our own console. Okay, so they formed an Xbox team out of people that had actually been meeting in secret to talk about this whole DirectX gaming initiative for a while. Not secret, but like Microsoft's a big company.
Yeah, they
you
were
know.
like, we have an idea.
Behind spaceship doors.
We
Yeah.
need a gaming console. And one guy was like, why? And he was like, no, one letter before that. And that's how they opened up the meeting.
Meeting adjourned.
This team consisted of Otto Burks, the guy that replaced Alex St. John after he got fired for the spaceship thing. Ted Hayes, who was a developer relations guy. He worked for Microsoft Game Studios, getting developers to come over to the platform. Seamus Buckley, who was a
Great
former
name.
game dev.
Made up name.
And Kevin Bacchus, who worked at a game publisher, a PC game publisher, and loved DirectX so much they quit his job and joined Microsoft. So
Wow, okay.
these are pretty good guys to join
yeah.
this.
He was the one who won the date with the Playboy model. She definitely blew him. That's why he was like, I love DirectX.
He won the auction.
So these four had been talking for a while about DirectX and about the Microsoft's place in the gaming space. They had a fifth member.
That's where they came up with Fusion Frenzy, right?
No. They had a fifth member named Nat Brown, who was not really a programming guy, but he was pretty high up. He had lunch with Bill Gates sometimes, and they were like, yo, we need this guy to get like our word out or whatever.
Right.
But he also was super interested in the business side of gaming when he realized that Sony's PlayStation division was less than 1% of the company. I think it's like 0.0048% of the employees at Sony at the time made the PlayStation. It was
Jeez, yeah.
1,200 out of a worldwide 250,000 employees. But PlayStation that year was accounting for 60% of Sony's overall profits.
Holy fuck,
Yeah,
really?
Jesus.
Yeah.
Jeez, that is insane. I did
Yes.
not even think about that.
And honestly, with the state of their movies and like music and stuff, these
I
days,
forgot
that's
they made
still,
movies.
That still may be true. Their movies are like
Oh,
division
it's-
is bad.
well,
it's
it's
Like,
like they also do TVs and like tech and stuff too.
they do,
so,
but like that the PlayStation division is huge. For
It's
them.
not true anymore because their PlayStation division is much bigger now. But yes, the
right,
profits thing is totally true. PlayStation makes up
Yeah.
easily
that's
the
weird
majority
that they
of
do all
the
that
Sony's
shit.
part.
Nobody
Yeah.
knows. Like Sony probably has their hands in all sorts of ways to make
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Little in fact, Sony actually invaded Crimea. That's nobody knows. That's where they made a lot of their profits.
Okay, so, but again, typical programmer fashion, not understanding how the world works.
Right.
They decided that the original idea was similar to that of Valve's recent failure, the Steam box, which is they wanted to
They
get.
should have called it the Brink box. Probably would have made a lot more money.
They wanted to
Bundle
get.
that thing up. It had so much potential.
They wanted to get manufacturers to create a computer that Microsoft would then brand with some name and guarantee could run all their approved games.
That's still a market that out there. Like,
That's a
I really
genius
think it
idea.
is.
At
Yeah.
the time, I don't think it was.
maybe not
Because
then.
that was the idea through and through until eventually, and we'll get there, they were
Right.
like, no,
and
consoles
this
are different.
this console would just be
Yeah.
this is based on DirectX.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they wanted to create a version of a Windows PC that was meant to run games better than a normal PC because even with DirectX, computers are not as good at running games as consoles because there's a lot of shit in the way. The operating system really gets in the way. Gaming operating systems are made...
Pesky OSs.
Yeah, gaming operating systems are made to not be in the way.
Yeah,
To just
exactly,
let
'cause they're not the
games run.
forefront. Let the games run
That's
and
why,
have some sort of
That's why you
interface.
can buy a 1080 Ti and your computer can run games a little bit better than a PlayStation 4, which has like 10% of the
Right.
power because
it's fully dedicated.
yes,
to that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the console was meant to be based on DirectX. The project was codenamed Project Midway, named after the World War II battle in which Americans turned the tide on the Japanese.
Oh my fucking god!
so
Are you
dark.
joking?
So I nearly lost it when I read that. So with the state of the Xbox One in Japan, was the PS4's code name like Pearl Harbor or something?
We have an idea for a console. It's going to be an atomic bomb for Sony.
Well, we'll get there.
Oh God!
So
I want PlayStation 4s giving kids radiation in their living room for generations to come.
If
Jesus, Bill, settle down.
If Japanese developers caught wind of that, wouldn't they be like, "Fuck off"? Like that's so fucked up.
yeah. So and this console, here's where the sweet part of the story comes in. This console was made with the best of intentions. Obviously, Microsoft wanted a piece of this fucking video game money, but also
Yeah, that video game money.
the people making the console were talking to game developers, and a lot of game developers were bitching about how Nintendo and Sony were hard to deal with. And Microsoft was like, we can make a console that's easy to deal with. We can work with these developers, see what they want, and make a console that's way easier to deal with. And that's all it'll take. They'll come over to our platform. They'll make games for us because it'll be so much easier.
Right.
And that's where the Xbox idea kind of started. They're like, we want some of that fucking Skrilla, but also we want to make this easy on the developers because Sony and Japanese companies, which all three of them were at the time, were very notorious for being very difficult to work with.
They still can be.
Yes. Sony's gotten better at it. Nintendo kind of has. But so the first documented meeting for Xbox, the Xbox team, the official Xbox team, took place on March 30th, 1999, which was a little under a month after the announcement of the PS2.
Nice.
Which is also crazy because when you think about it, the Xbox didn't come out that long after the PS2.
No.
And they were probably deep in development on the PS2 at the time, and they were just jotting words down on paper a month after that thing was announced.
Man, it was just a console made out of spite and
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
But there was I think there was also what the Germans had a console they were in the works called the Himmler, I think it was codenamed. Didn't they have that at the time?
so yeah, they wanted a platform that could meet developers' needs. They didn't want to get
So not the PS3.
Yeah. this is where it gets pretty. You're like, these guys have a good intentions.
Right.
Other hardware makers, like I said, were notorious for being difficult to deal with. Basically, they made the hardware the way they wanted to. They made the tools to make the games on the hardware in a deadline. And they made them as shittily and quickly and cheaply as possible. And then they said, yo, if you want to make games for our platform, you fucking figure it out. Like, the documentation was terrible.
Christ.
Like, game developers had a really hard time dealing with these consoles because they were all different and they were all really weird. And so...
Yeah, I never thought of it from that perspective, to be honest. That's actually a good reason for why probably a lot of third-party consoles fail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So... and the PC was people like developing for the PC. It had a very easy architecture, but it was a place for very, I'll say, nerdy games.
Yeah.
Like I said, Flight Simulator and Age of Empires were their two big hits.
Yeah.
They were
Flight
niche,
Simulator
though,
and a Strat. It was very niche markets, and it was things for people with a lot of time on their hands that didn't have a lot of other stuff to do. It wasn't a place for the creative to thrive. That was the consoles.
Right.
So they wanted to make a console where the creative side of games could thrive. They wanted games as a medium to evolve.
Yeah.
They wanted to get the software and the hardware out of the developer's way, and they wanted to say, take your nerdy hobby and turn it into an art form, which is a very noble
It is. It's
pursuit.
awesome.
That's
awesome.
And it worked because
Yeah.
now we have a ton of very artsy indie games that wouldn't
Under
have
the
been
guise
possible.
of getting revenge for the Japanese.
Yeah.
Against the Japanese, yeah.
So they were quoted as saying they wanted to make games accepted and respected. They wanted them to be, quote, cool, not nerdy. So
Boy, if times changed there with that phrasing, right? Like
Yeah.
now it's like you capitalize on nerd.
Yeah.
I think it's,
Okay. So
it's an
now
endearing.
we come to one of the following meetings where the actual name Xbox was born. Obviously, the X in Xbox comes from DirectX.
Yeah.
When the meeting started, the original
Not from the place that Bill Gates drew on his world map over Japan when he drew an X over it.
Yo,
Okay.
fuck this right here.
So this is where the porn thing comes in.
Yes.
Love me some porn.
The original name for the DirectX was the DirectX box. It was Project Midway, but the original name for the thing when they referred to it was the Direct Xbox. And they called it that for a while. And Hayes, one of the guys I mentioned earlier, wrote on the board as a joke, the XXX and this was a
and
again,
underneath he was like, "Yo," he went around the office asking people like, "Yo, I have 2 CDs. Does anybody want a couple CDs?"
yeah.
So were there like cartoon boobs drawn under it?
Yeah.
But again, this was typical programmer fashion. There was so much behind this joke. Like it wasn't just a throwaway like
Right.
boobs.
Oh yeah,
It was meant because he figured that Microsoft could get another cut of this market if they would just allow adult content. Sony,
Oh wow.
Sony and Nintendo and Sega were all very against adult content. They were making toys, right?
Yeah.
And Sony was winning because they
changed a
weren't.
lot.
Like games like Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil.
Yeah, we
were
talked
very
about that.
adult.
A lot of things that
Yeah.
was featured
So-
on that console was
And-
like would Silent
Resident Evil's
Hill
scary
and
as
everything.
fuck, dude.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and
think about the themes and stuff in games like Silent Hill and
Yeah.
at the time, like
The joke goes back to the war between VHS and Betamax. Betamax, another Sony product that failed
Right.
because they wouldn't
Yeah.
let porn on their platforms.
It's true.
So-
and that happened again with DVDs, right?
yeah,
Or
we all
something?
know
No,
porn
it happened
drives,
with
right?
HD
Or
DVDs.
HD, sorry,
Yeah.
HDs, yeah.
But that time Sony won because Blu-ray was
true.
Sony. So he wrote that out as a joke, but like there was a lot of meaning behind the joke because again, programmer. But like,
Comedians.
Known for their humor. Yeah.
but then something clicked in somebody's head, and they were just like, "Wait a minute, Direct Xbox is a mouthful, and XXX is a stupid. But what if we took the first 2 X's off and we just called it Xbox?"
Nice.
And this is a bunch of programmers and executives
Yeah.
sitting in a room, so they're like, "Let's just call it Xbox. It's short, it's easy to remember, and we'll let the marketing team."
It must have clicked right away.
Yeah.
Don't you think like that's just like one of those things where you're like,
yeah.
damn.
Well, that
It sounds good. Like,
Or
to
I like to
say.
think the other world is that there was like some Goodwill Hunting style janitor, and he was like, just whoa, don't erase that. And then he just got rid of 2 X's, and then somebody walked up behind him and was like,
so their whole thing was like, we'll let the marketing team come up with the real name, and then Xbox stuck.
yeah, as it should have. It's fucking brilliant.
So after this, the project started to pick up a lot of steam. They recruited a couple tech guys, and word also started getting outside of the company.
You mentioned Rob Wyatt.
Rob
right?
Wyatt will come up later.
Okay.
He's
now at Atari or whatever
Yeah.
the hell Atari is now.
he was a
VCS.
big tech guy.
Okay.
He is responsible for a lot of the chip architecture of the Xbox. But word also started, speaking of chip architecture, because the chip architecture guy joined the team, word started getting out to the chip manufacturers. So NVIDIA, Intel, and AMD learned about the project. So Microsoft realized that they needed a hardware team because Microsoft at this point, mostly a software company.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't have like anything to actually run all this
So
garbage.
they had a small Microsoft hardware group, and this was led by a guy named Rick Thompson, who will come up later.
Not the politician.
Not the politician. And this division was responsible for mice, keyboards, flight sticks, things like that,
Yeah.
right? And he was like a Wall Street guy, and he ran that business like clockwork. Like it was like razor thin margins, and he was like, he made money but barely, and he knew if he ever launched a product that lost money, Bill Gates would fucking fire him like that.
As we
So-
talk about Bill Gates right now.
Yeah. So like,
He's like looking close, like, is that guy Japanese?
but so the idea of consoles kind of scared this guy because consoles they're run on very razor thin margins. Most of the time when you make a console, you
sell
lose
it at
money
a
for a
loss,
while.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that was their internal hardware group, but Microsoft had also acquired a company called Web TV.
So interesting thing about this, who at the time, WebTV, like they were pretty ahead of the game with their pushes to combine like television and internet features
Yeah.
into like one thing.
Really?
Yeah, they had like a box product thing that I think my mom had. And it was this thing that was like this adapter that you plugged into like browse web pages and check email and stuff
On your
Yeah,
TV.
it was essentially
Yeah.
a wireless keyboard and mouse thing
Yeah.
like we have now, like
And
a
we're
laptop
talking about
setup.
like 99, 2000
Yeah.
era?
And it was this is like 97.
this is before that.
Jeez, really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
way fucking up.
And it was
crazy.
like it plugged in. It ran a stripped down version of Windows, and it was meant to check your email and
Yeah,
browse the
yeah.
internet on your TV.
I weirdly have vivid memories of that.
Very
Made
cool.
up of former 3DO employees.
Oh, really?
Yes. So
Okay.
they knew some stuff about consoles.
Sure. Didn't know anything about making good games.
No. So this caused a bit of a tear in the team because Bill Gates is like, hey, we spent all this money on these people that used to make consoles. Why don't they help you? And the guys that were on the Xbox team at the time were like, no, because we don't want a stripped down little VCR thing. We want a PC
Yeah.
for the living room.
Yeah.
And so
They were like, basically, these guys are scrubs.
But they wanted something closer to a PC. Does that mean like a mouse and keyboard or like what?
no, they wanted a controller, but they
Okay.
wanted PC parts. They wanted a PC
Gotcha.
because PCs are made of off-the-shelf parts
Yeah.
that are made by the millions. They're not custom made.
Right.
They're made. They wanted it to be upgradable like a PC, which is a terrible idea for a console.
Yeah.
But and
It's almost like it's as terrible of an idea of having to explain to a kid how to edit a game in order to play the
Yeah.
live
That's the thing. It's like the less accessible it becomes. Yeah.
Yeah,
like
the worse off you are.
Yeah.
and the web TV team wanted to make something like the 3DO, something like they made before.
Kind of like were they more in line to something like the Steam box? Or
No, that was the other people.
Oh,
that
right,
was the
right.
Xbox team.
Sorry,
they
yeah.
wanted a console. They
Right.
wanted something that could be made cheaply and easily out of custom parts and run a very slow, stripped down OS.
Okay.
And like there was a fight because the web TV team was like, "Yo, your idea costs too much fucking money," and then the Xbox team was like, "Yeah, your thing sucks ass though." And so like
Yeah.
they wanted to start at the 3DO and work their way up. This team wanted to start at a PC and work their way down. And as we'll learn and know from history, they met somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Yeah. But Ed Freeze joined
At a
the
crossing.
Xbox team.
Across, like an X. All right, go on.
Yeah.
Ed
That's
Freeze.
so good.
Ed Freeze hopped aboard the Xbox train. He was the head of Microsoft Game Studios at the time.
Right.
And he was siding with the Xbox team because, of course he was, because he was a fucking PC game publisher
Yeah.
guy.
Right. Yeah.
But so a meeting was held with Bill Gates in May of 1999 between the web TV team and the Xbox team. And he was basically like, I'm Judge, Jury, and Executioner.
I demand more fusion.
You
frenzy.
give me your ideas, and I will lay the hammer down on
Wow.
whoever's wrong.
Is that like the
Right.
South Park episode where Butters locks the Crips and the Bloods in the rec center?
Pretty much, yeah. So, PC team, they wanted the console to have a hard drive. They didn't want to run the games off discs
Right.
because it was faster to run off a hard drive.
Yeah, I mean, this was before PS2 launched their hard drive accessory as well.
They
right?
wanted
Yeah.
They wanted
Yeah, I was
PC.
going to say everybody eventually come around to that.
Well,
shit.
yeah, totally.
They wanted
Yeah.
PC parts, to which the Windows team, or to which the web TV team was like, that's a lot of fucking money.
Yeah.
Consoles don't cost that much money.
Right, yeah.
And the web TV team wanted to make another set-top box. They wanted to use Windows CE.
Right.
Big problem there. Windows CE couldn't run DirectX. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
yeah. That's a problem.
so basically, the problem that Bill Gates had to decide between was make a console that's cheap but good enough to compete with the PlayStation, or make something that's a little more expensive but is
great.
much better.
Yeah.
Such a
and-
decision still plaguing video games.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
he had a Manhattan Project of proportion decision to make. you
Yeah.
know?
So wait, who won this fight?
So the Xbox team eventually won because the whole Windows CE can't run DirectX thing was a big deal. You know.
Yeah, it's not
They're-
CE
they're
box,
trying to push-
morons.
They're trying to push DirectX.
That's not
so
catchy at
if,
all.
if
Fuck this.
if your Xbox can't run DirectX, then what the fuck are you doing?
You doing?
So Bill Gates was like, "Yo, figure out a way to make it cheaper, but like I'm on your side. We need to make this thing
Right.
like a good
Yeah.
platform." But again, going with this vision, we had a bunch of like developer relations guys and programmers working on this. So basically, they're like, "Hey, why don't we get the developer relations guys to go talk to some developers and see like what's good for them? That's where we'll start making this thing. We'll go get some input."
It's like
And
the
then
best decision I've heard
It's funny
all
that-
story.
Well,
you
it's
know?
like this platform is like getting built before like the hardware foot is in front of the software foot. Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. So basically, it was
It's probably
I wanna
because
say it
Microsoft
was-
thought they had software in the bag, to be honest. You
It's
know what
true,
I mean?
yeah. I just
Yeah.
more meant of like all the partnerships with developers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was
Publishers
I
and
believe Blackley and Bacchus were the two guys. Bacchus being the direct. Oh, Hayes too. Hayes was the developers relation guy.
Okay.
Bacchus was the guy that loved DirectX, and then Bill Ackley was the fucking hardware guy.
But they wanted to bring developers in, just saying like how much easier it was to develop for this.
So they were like,
over the
"Hey,
PS2.
we know that Sony and Nintendo were like, hey, here's our fucking hardware. Figure it out, idiot." And they were like, "We're here to make the hardware with you."
Yeah.
Which a lot of developers
It's pretty appealing.
just responded very positively to at the time. So they got some input, and then they're like, "Cool, time to find some hardware partners."
Right.
Because we have a hardware team that can design this thing, but we can't make chips, right?
So who did they look to? 'Cause GameCube was Philips, right? Like who built the hardware for that thing? Like I don't know.
What, for the GameCube?
Yeah.
I don't know.
AMD, I believe.
AMD.
Oh, was it AMD? Philips actually, I think built the
board.
The board. Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. So who was PS2 then?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know anything about hardware.
It's a lot. It's a lot of Sony.
Sure.
Japanese companies.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you in a spot. I was just
I
genuinely
believe
curious.
I believe PlayStation was Sony because Sony built boards themselves.
Oh. Okay.
So they're like, we need to make this console, but we can't actually make the console. We need to find some chip manufacturers.
Right.
They went to Intel, and Intel basically, a representative from Intel told Bill Gates, like, this is a bad idea. It's going to cost way too much money. We don't want to be on board with a failed product. Sorry.
Even to take a loss on like per console, or just like
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
They're like, this is going to be... And that news kind of got out and spread around the Microsoft offices to the point where
That's rough.
joining the Xbox team was kind of thought of as career suicide.
Jeez.
So they had a hard time getting people to join the Xbox team from other divisions of Microsoft because everybody's like, dude, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting fired when this thing comes out.
That's sad.
But despite that, Bill Gates pushed on.
he didn't really believed.
Yes,
Yeah.
he did.
Yeah.
And he is probably the person, like, if Bill Gates wasn't at Microsoft, the Xbox wouldn't exist.
Yeah, this
Because
is kind of one of those situations
Yeah.
where your eccentric billionaire who's like, I want this idea, actually kind of like turned out okay.
Yeah, turned out, yeah. It's good that he did.
Yeah. So, but Bill Gates expanded the team himself. If people didn't want to join it, Bill Gates would make people join it, essentially.
Yeah. He had
So
a
that-
lineup and he was like,
Yeah.
all right, I'll take you, not you, the guy whose name was YU. He didn't take him onto the team.
So the aforementioned Rick Thompson, who was scared of joining the console business, was made head of the business side of the project.
Be afraid now.
Talks had been going on more about dropping out of the whole Steambox-like architecture
And
of
some
the
people
thing.
did drop out, right?
So
Yeah.
Hayes and Burks, two of the original four, the four horsemen of the Xbox, two of them.
Xbocalypse.
Yeah.
The Xbocalypse. Jeez, why did I... gosh.
They dropped out
We'll
because
fix
they're like
that in editing.
they dropped out, moved on to other projects within Microsoft because they're like, this is not the PC we wanted.
Idiots.
But in their place, somebody very important was brought in. Which, if you know anything about Xbox
Yes.
history, you will know this name. Jay Allard
Yeah.
was brought in as
yeah,
project
Jay
manager.
I like the Zune. Fuck off, everybody
super
else.
dude.
Me too, dude. I had a
Yeah.
great- I love
Jay
that
Allard
thing.
also responsible for the Zune.
Yes.
So he was brought in as project manager. Blackley and Bacchus, the other two of the four horsemen of the Xbocalypse. We're not happy with this decision because they were like, we've been here since the beginning. We should be managing this thing.
Right.
But they were programmers, and programmers can't manage shit. That's why managers exist within software companies.
Yeah.
So
That's all they know.
eventually, and
typing.
Blackley was like the head guy for this project. So eventually they talked, and Jay Allard and Blackley came to an agreement. They realized that Jay Allard finally understood the vision of the project, because when he joined, he was not informed of what the Xbox was. He was familiar with games, but not really. And
Like lions?
and he understood the technical expertise that these guys had.
Sure.
And he was like, okay, you do your thing, but I'm important too. And he made Blackley realize that, like, Jay Allard had a good business sense. He had managed projects that had been successful before, and because of that, he had a lot of clout with the higher ups.
Okay.
So basically,
he could, if things were not going some way or some another, he could kind of push it in a certain direction.
So Jay Allard formed something called the Advanced Technology Group and put Blackley in charge of that. So basically, Blackley was in charge of all of the technology and design of the Xbox, and Jay Allard would keep people out of his hair, essentially. And
Perfect.
Yeah.
So that's the agreement they came to. So now, head of this technology team, Blackley decided, cool, I don't have to meet with fucking businessmen every day.
Yeah.
Now we can really hit the ground running with this thing.
Yeah.
So he got the aforementioned Rob Wyatt to start designing some hardware stuff. He got people within the company to build him some prototypes and demos, work with some developers
now,
again. Yeah. And there's a story that Bacchus and Blackley went and met with 40 developers in 1 week to pitch them on the Xbox.
What a fun time.
Yeah.
Probably like 4 or 5 meetings a day.
Yeah. Imagine by that 5th one, man. You're just like,
But
Hey, here's my Xbox. Fuck it.
so here's where
How y'all feel about the Japanese?
they almost lost Bill Gates, though. So
you don't want to get him
after working on a way to get Windows to run these games, they realized there's a reason that PC games don't run as fast. Windows gets in the way of games. So they said, if we're going to make this thing happen, we got to ditch Windows. Which Bill Gates, not a fan.
Yeah.
But they pitched it to him and they said, we're going to make a custom OS that uses some of the Windows code, mostly DirectX. And it's going to run DirectX. It's going to be a DirectX-based operating system, but every other part of Windows is unnecessary for this.
Yeah.
You
don't need all that.
Which that was a huge decision because that essentially killed the whole Steambox idea, right?
Yeah. Which was a good move.
Yes.
Obviously.
It was a good move.
To get rid of things that are in the way and focus it, like you want to make a good console, you needed to focus on being a game system.
Like this could have ended up being one of those fucking multimedia consoles,
Yes.
like the CDI.
And then just fall to the wayside.
Amiga
And we'd be talking.
or
Remember when
3DO?
Microsoft tried to make that, blah blah blah, whatever.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh, what a time.
But so this is when it became a console. It was no longer a living room PC. It was a console. This thing was meant to run fucking games, and that's it.
And he caved.
Yeah, Bill Gates caved.
Only after playing Fusion Frenzy. All right, I'll stop.
Frenzy was not
No, I mean he had to. If he had any fucking sense in his head, there's no way. And think about it at this point. You're talking late '90s. He's already one of the most successful, tech magnates around.
Absolutely.
Like he had to have had some sense to look. There's no way Bill Gates didn't do like the equivalent of what Bing or Ask, I don't know, or
Ask Jeeves.
Jeeves, Lycos.
Yahoo or whatever, and just be like consoles, and then like find out that a lot of them failed for a specific reason.
very
You know what I mean?
But that decision was huge. That decision is when the Xbox started to actually take shape.
Yeah.
They decided to include the Ethernet port, which was a big deal at the time.
I wonder if that'll come into play
now,
ever. I wonder,
like they did that over the dial-up connection,
Yeah.
which is what the Dreamcast had,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because like you could take it out, but that came packed in with that 56K modem thing,
Yes.
like that you just plugged
And
into. It's a huge step up from that.
This was clocked as costing them around $220 million.
Jeez.
Because they would
Holy
have
shit.
saved a couple bucks on each console that they made if they put a 56K modem in it. But we'll learn later that was a great decision.
Oh
Because
yeah, the
eventually,
back end on that. Like I imagine at the time it's like fuck this much, and then now they're looking at it like.
But like the other console makers ended up adding adapters.
Oh,
for that.
yeah,
They
exactly.
were in the early stages of planning Xbox Live, and they knew they were going to charge for
Right.
that. And Xbox Live was a big part of the plan to be like, we'll sell this console at a loss, and we'll make our money back on Xbox Live.
subscriptions.
God,
Yeah.
the foresight
Which
there.
PlayStation
Yeah.
and GameCube both had adapters later. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just
they both had external adapters you had to buy for an Ethernet port,
Yeah.
which
That's
cost
some-
way more to produce than $220
totally.
million.
I wonder who was involved with that. That's just something crazy. Like the
Yeah.
foresight on Xbox Live. Like nobody could have pictured that it would become that.
Totally.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
such an extreme circumstance.
Also, this hard drive thing was a real sticking point, but they were keeping it. The hard drive was super expensive, probably the most expensive part of the console. but devs loved having a hard drive.
So did I.
Devs-
Burning CDs to that thing.
Fucking
Devs,
A, dude.
devs hated memory cards. They wanted done with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
So,
It's a bullshit accessory with and
Yeah.
a waste of material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that stayed, and that was big because that was going to make the project cost a lot of money. But
yeah.
Bill Gates was like, if it makes it better, let's do
Yeah.
it. Again, Rob Wyatt was quoted as saying, "This is a huge mistake. Power supply was included in the Xbox, which is why the original Xbox, was huge
And weighed 300
weighed
pounds.
a
Which is
ton.
why, actually, you could have flown 2 Xbox originals over Japan and done the
Drop
equal
that.
amount of damage.
Yeah. So and again, that made the console huge. It put a lot of fans in there, which made it bigger, made it kind of loud, but
Hey.
Made it easier to die.
and here's an interesting thing. The color was decided on. Microsoft did a lot of research into their competitors, and they realized Sony used red and yellow for their logo for the PlayStation 1.
Oh, like the boot up.
And then the PS2 was all blue.
Blue and purple.
Sega's logo was blue. The Dreamcast logo was red.
Red,
Nintendo's
yeah, red,
logo,
white,
red.
Oh, well, red. Their logo.
There was a little bit of green in the Sony's
about the logos,
in the
not the
PlayStation
consoles.
logo. There was a little bit of green in the N64 logo, but nobody had picked on green. And green was an extreme fucking color, you know, Mountain Dew and all that shit.
Hell
like,
yeah.
yeah,
like that,
Capital X.
like that special see-through Donkey Kong N64. That was
Yeah.
green.
So that's when the green became the Xbox color, which it is still to this day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's their color.
So the cables, here's an interesting one. The cables a decision was made that no matter how much it costs, the cables had to be as long as humanly possible.
Fucking good.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah,
Nintendo
yeah,
still
yeah.
hasn't learned with their
No,
fucking
exactly.
mini
the
consoles.
short ass little fuck.
Yeah.
Except for
It's insane.
the motion device on the original Wii.
Oh yeah,
That
to guarantee
cable-
it got tangled as much as possible.
Yeah, that cable was like
Yeah.
400 feet long.
and they covered it in sticky stuff so it would wrap it. Yeah, like, I don't know
Right,
what the
because
fuck.
we've talked before privately about how when we were kids we had to sit up against the TV because the cables weren't long enough.
Yeah. Yep.
Microsoft was like, that can't be a thing. If adults are going to play this, they want to sit on their couches.
Yeah.
So they're like,
Fucking A.
make the
Fucking
cables
smart
as
move.
long as possible.
That's when a room full of people gets done. Yeah, I feel like just sitting back and playing a game.
This is also when the design of the original Xbox was designed. That big black box with the X on top and
Yeah.
that green jewel in the middle
It's a
that said
cool looking
Xbox.
thing.
It is fucking
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. That was when that whole decision was
great
made.
boot up thing too. The when it like
yeah.
breaks
Yeah,
through.
Oh yeah, the
like,
nuclear energy.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Ooh, weird
fucking-
allegory there now. Retrospect.
But yeah, so that was decided on. They also, I don't know if you remember this when they announced, we'll get to this later, but when they announced the Xbox, they had a show one that was a giant Chrome X. Do you remember that?
No, that's awesome.
That's when that was also designed, and it was apparently like 50 pounds. And, but a lot of those decisions that I talked about, obviously, very forward thinking, very smart.
Yeah.
But they cost a lot of money at the time.
Yeah.
Now every console has an Ethernet port and a hard drive, but at the time they were expensive, and this was an issue. And Rick Thompson, being this
When it
scared
came to
little,
like negotiating,
being the
pricing,
scared little
that's right.
bitch he is, went whining to Bill Gates, and he was like, "Look, these guys are designing something crazy, and it's going to cost a lot of money." And he had run the numbers, being a businessman, being a Wall Street guy, and he decided that this company couldn't price this console at a price that would sell well enough to not lose more than $1 billion before it saw a dime in revenue.
Jesus.
Woof.
And which we will later learn to be true, if the Xbox was forced to match the PlayStation 2 in price at $299, that number would probably shoot up to $3.3 billion.
Holy shit. So yeah, the PS2 was $299
Yep.
at launch.
And as was the Xbox. But Bill Gates with fucking just like kill Japan in his heart and dollar signs in his eyes was just like, fuck it, keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
I don't care if this company runs run into the ground.
Yeah. So this project began to pick up steam. A lot of final decisions were being made. And because of this, word was starting to get out even more, not just to other companies, But to the general public, journalists were picking up on this.
Yeah. This was before. Was this before the GDC
Yes.
announcement?
Yes.
Okay. I remember some of these.
Next Generation magazine writers Tom Russo and Chris Charla, who, if you know anything about Xbox, now works there. Chris Charla is the head of the ID at Xbox program now. But he was the original one to break the story and ruin their day. He printed a story about Microsoft having a console in the works.
Okay.
That story was then followed by a story in the Wall Street Journal, which Next Generation magazine, not a huge deal for Microsoft. The Wall Street Journal,
Yeah.
huge deal
Big
for
fucking
Microsoft.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
because
Microsoft.
they're like, yo, check out this console business where everybody will lose a bunch of money.
So
Microsoft's
naturally, that's
getting
when
into
Sony fucking found
Yeah.
out, I assume, right?
Yeah.
And Nintendo.
So, yeah, that's when everybody else found out. But more specifically, that's when Sony found out.
Yeah.
And there were a couple quotes within Sony that were just like, we heard about it, but we didn't realize they were serious.
Look how they're not scared
Yeah.
about Nintendo.
Yeah. This led to a meeting called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Little unnecessary.
This is
but
literally
alright.
such a big war allegory. The entire thing.
It really
this was
is.
named after a meeting that went on for multiple days and murdered a lot of the Valentine's Day plans that these guys had with their wives. So again, it's a little much, but yeah. But so
This
they
is a meeting at Microsoft or Sony?
Microsoft.
Microsoft, yeah.
So Microsoft met and everybody was in attendance. And not just Bill Gates and the Xbox team, but we're talking all the higher ups. People you've probably heard of, like Steve Ballmer was there.
Shit.
Yeah. And they were just like, are we going to do this?
Ooh.
And Steve Ballmer was quoted as saying, okay, look, if we do this, if we agree right now
no
to do
turning
this,
back.
we never revisit this decision. We threw our weight behind these guys. We support these guys 100%.
Well, fucking good. I like
Yeah.
that.
No,
Yeah.
no, I
Whatever.
do
That's-
too, but
that's-
it's just crazy that it had to get like.
Well, they're here. They're at the precipice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're at the you have a
That's
chance to
the
lose $1 billion
crossroads right
or
there.
make.
He was like, we cancel it now or it's coming out. Those
Yeah.
are the two options. And Jay Allard was quoted as saying, we have to stop fucking around. He said he wanted to know for sure that this was happening. And he wanted the rest of the company to get out of his goddamn way.
Hell yeah, I like that. But I mean, in all
J.R. is
fairness,
a boss.
the
Yeah.
dude, look at the time he's put in and the effort. You know,
Yeah.
going into this.
That's
you know,
no, it's a good point.
He didn't want to meet with any more higher ups. He wanted his
He
project
wanted- he
to
wanted
keep
to be
going.
able to
yeah.
just fucking-
He wanted to do what he wanted without getting approval from 30 people.
Right.
So everybody big to small, like the guys I've mentioned before, and guys I don't even know their names, pitched their plans for Xbox. We had Ed Freeze giving his plan for like what the software was going to be like, how he was going to split Microsoft Game Studios between making games for Xbox and making games for PC. How like Rob Wyatt was talking about how he was going to design the chip architecture, and like we're getting real technical, and we're getting real business, and we're getting like
Creative too.
creative
Yeah, it's like
too.
every.
It was
yeah.
like everybody pitched their thing to the higher ups, and like Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates were just there to be like, yes, no, yes, no.
yeah.
And at the end of a very long, grueling, multi-day meeting, the Xbox was given, pun intended, the final green light.
Yeah, I see what you did there.
Yeah. So they were all on board at this point. Bill Gates is like, we're gonna bury these Japs, like no
That's a
matter
direct
what
quote.
it takes.
That's a direct quote. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, don't get mad at me. Okay, so Microsoft was getting pretty far along with their console, and then they realized, fuck, consoles need games. Oops, they had been talking to developers these whole time, but I don't think they had gotten in like writing that like people were gonna make games for this thing. They were just like, we're designing a console for you, and they're like, word, let us know when it's ready. And then they
Yeah.
were like, I guess it's
Yeah,
time.
it's ready.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's ready. But Microsoft was like, obviously we're not going to get developers support right away. We need to make our own games.
Yeah.
And they're
Smart,
like, we
smart
don't. We
move.
have Microsoft Game Studios. They're not big enough to handle a console launch. We need to get some help. They went out looking to buy some companies. They made, and you've definitely heard of every company I'm
yeah.
about to name. They went out and made an offer to buy Square.
Oh,
Before
shit.
they merged
This was pre-merger with NX, right?
Yeah,
in
it was
03,
pre-merger with
yeah.
NX.
Square Soft, man.
Square wanted
Squaresoft.
$2.5 billion for 40% of their company. Microsoft laughed
Said
them out of
no,
the room.
yeah, they said no
They
dice.
said no dice.
No
That's
dice.
that's fucking insane.
That is kind of insane.
And now there
Yes.
won't be a Final Fantasy on an Xbox console for another 13
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. At one point, Midway was in consideration. but they were a struggling
the
company
irony.
at the
Yeah,
time.
I was gonna say that probably would have helped them later
Yeah.
before they went under. But
Oh yeah, no.
I was
but
gonna
the-
say the irony of the name as well.
Oh yeah. But the problem with that was that they decided, other than Mortal Kombat, which Midway owned, there was really nothing to gain.
Wait a
Yeah.
minute, I just remembered. Final Fantasy 11 actually went on 360.
You're right.
Before
you're right.
13.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Sorry, no corrections here.
Yeah, thanks. We get it, buddy.
Microsoft also looked into straight up buying Sega, which Sega declined, which maybe they shouldn't have.
Yeah, they should. I remember hearing about this ages ago and be like, what a stupid move.
I'm kind of surprised.
This was right before the Dreamcast came out, I believe. Or
Oh,
no, right
okay.
after, but
okay.
before it
okay.
got killed.
I mean, they went pretty buddy-buddy with Nintendo after
Yeah.
the Dreamcast, ironically, but maybe the Japanese thing hitting American companies.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, sticking
they also
together.
made an offer to Electronic Arts, who declined.
They're pretty close with them now.
Yes.
It's a good move
And
on their
here's
part.
here's the big
Probably.
one. Microsoft made an offer to Nintendo.
to buy Nintendo.
What a,
buy
what a
Nintendo.
weird future we could have been in.
Now,
right now.
this requires
They're
some
friends
this
now,
requires
so
some
it's-
explanation. Back in that day,
Twitter should
Microsoft's market cap was about $50 billion. Nintendo's was about 5, and I think Sony's was
Wow.
about 10.
Jeez.
Which they're a lot higher now. But Microsoft said, we want to make the hardware. You guys will make the games. So Mario and the
Smart.
gang will come over to our platform. Nintendo said, that's ridiculous. You've never made hardware, and we have. Why would you design the hardware?
yeah.
So
Man, that deal could have been amazing.
yeah. Also, we're also 100 years older of a company
Imagine,
than you. or
imagine
maybe-
a console as good as like the 360, but with Nintendo making
Yeah.
games
They would just
on it.
waste They would just waste it. That's what they would
Yeah.
do.
But like, so Nintendo, in typical businessman fashion, instead of just saying no, they said, we'll make you an offer. $25 billion
Okay.
for the company. Which, like I said, most of Microsoft's market cap at the time, about 5 times more than Nintendo was worth at the time.
Yeah.
And this was pre-Wii, and they're worth a lot more now. But
NDS.
Yeah.
so there was a lot of back and forth here, a lot more than you would think there would be. But a deal was obviously never reached. It was pretty much businessmen fucking with each other. They both decided they didn't want to do it after the first meeting, but they kept going back and forth.
That
God,
Wise
what
Kid
a
sketch. Yeah.
to be wealthy. But could you imagine now? It's nowadays, and it's like the end of Halo 3, and it's like a post-credit scene, and like Master Chief like walks up to a hilltop and like opens the helmet, and
Mario's
it's
face.
Mario.
Could
Yeah.
have had them in Smash Brothers, man.
All right. So they were a little unsuccessful in getting developers, but
Right.
we'll remedy that situation a little later. Right now, they needed to start manufacturing this thing.
I still can't get over how close to the gun this is.
Yeah.
Like,
This had been planned, I believe, to go head to head with the PlayStation.
yeah.
The release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
PS2 or
yeah, I mean, in the United States, the PS2.
Yeah.
The PS2 was already out in Japan.
PS2 was launched a little bit earlier in Japan, but yes, they wanted to go head to head with PlayStation in America. But they needed to decide who was going to make the console. The obvious choice was Nvidia,
Yeah.
because they're trying to court some PC ass people, and PC ass people love them some Nvidia. But Nvidia costs a lot of money. Obviously, when you're the best at what you do,
Yeah.
you charge for it. Microsoft said no. Microsoft instead, the web TV guys who I mentioned earlier were no longer involved in the project. I forgot to mention that they've been gone for a while.
Right.
That makes
they,
sense.
They
They
kind of
probably
got
got out
laughed
early.
out of the room.
Yeah.
But they came back with an idea. They had found this startup called Gigapixel, a company that was making chips, and they told Microsoft, "Yo, fuck Nvidia, we can custom make you a chip." And they basically proposed an architecture on paper that everybody kind of okayed. But
Okay.
Microsoft said, cool. They invested $15 million into Gigapixel.
Good for that start.
They bought most of the company, but not the whole thing. I think
Yeah.
they had a majority share in the company maybe. They also spent another $10 million to get Gigapixel to design their chips.
Oh, so 25 million total into these
Yeah.
guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were probably thrilled.
The Gigapixel was super thrilled. Microsoft, not so much. Once they brought the Gigapixel guys on board, they kind of realized these guys don't know what they're talking about.
I mean, I knew that's not who they went with in the
Yeah,
end, but
there's a reason that Nvidia costs so much money. It's because they know what the fuck they're doing. This Gigapixel thing turned out to be all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, like they brought him in. They were like, "All right, so I think the cheesecake's gonna go right here under this fan." And they're like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
So Gigapixel's not even around.
And
right?
the tech guy who was designing the console, Rob Wyatt, I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
he is quoted as saying, "This is the worst decision in the history of the Xbox project." He said,
Not the
we
lions
c-
from way earlier.
yeah, he said
That was a good decision.
we couldn't use the gigapixel chip. We knew the box would fail if we had to use this hardware.
So Bill Gates
Not only
obviously
that-
had all of the members of Gigapixel killed.
Not only that, but developers were not happy because
I bet.
this goes against the idea of the Xbox, right? We don't want you to make a custom chip. We want you to use PC parts. We know how to
So it's
develop for
easy
those.
to make
Yeah,
games
so it's
on.
easy to
We
make
want you to
games.
get Nvidia because
Their
we know
whole
how to
philosophy was
use Nvidia stuff.
right.
Um,
So they went back to Nvidia.
So they went back to Nvidia.
Yeah.
Because you might know, looking into the Xbox, it used an Nvidia chip.
Yeah.
Nvidia eventually came up with an idea, and they were like, "Listen, we can do this for cheaper. We found a smart way to do this for cheaper and quicker."
Okay.
So Nvidia was eventually hired.
Yeah, because they stand to make a lot of money too.
Yes.
They're like one thing though. Call it the V box.
Basically, Nvidia was going to make a deal with
gotta be
Microsoft.
pink instead.
Nvidia was going to make a deal with Microsoft where they were also going to lose money on the thing, but in doing so, they were going to have some deal where Nvidia would eventually make that money back later if the Xbox was successful. Nvidia didn't exactly want to put all their eggs in that basket. Like the Nvidia CEO was like, "We don't want this to bankrupt our company.
Yeah.
We can't make a deal like that." Eventually, they made a way to make it cheaper to the point where Microsoft would just pay them, and Microsoft would take all the liability.
Right.
So then a deal was reached. A deal was also made with AMD, the company Advanced Micro Devices.
Isn't that a
You know
competitor
them?
with Nvidia though?
And
Yeah.
They're not at the time.
Not at the time. Okay.
And they were gonna make
Who the
what?
fuck was it? Nvidia or AMD bought a graphics card maker, and now they're
okay.
a competitor with Nvidia. Back then, they
back
just
then they were
back
was for
then they just
processors.
made processors.
Right,
Yes,
yeah.
they were Intel's competitor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people were having conversations at Microsoft with AMD, and basically a decision was reached without Bill Gates' consent that AMD would make parts of this Xbox. Bill Gates on his own
Caught wind of that?
met with Intel.
sorry.
No, he didn't catch wind of
Okay.
that.
Oh,
he met with Intel. And the Intel CEO, who was earlier quoted as saying, "We don't want any part of this. It's going to cost too much money."
Oh.
Or not the CEO, some guy. But later he's like, "No, I lied. We want part of this." And they reached a deal. The people at AMD did not find out that they were no longer making part of the Xbox until Bill Gates publicly announced it was Intel.
I can't get over how many
wow.
companies that got like are just
I
like
know.
involved
Could you
in this
imagine
thing.
getting burned like
And this
that?
is all in the span of like.
But here's the thing. We have essentially three, at this point, there's a lot of little conventions, but we have three conventions where Microsoft can announce this thing. We have CES, which is in January, GDC, which is in March, and E3, which is in June. They missed the window for CES because of all these chip issues. So they had to push the announcement back to March 2000 at GDC, which would have been the GDC after Sony had announced the PlayStation, which is nuts too. Because if you think about it, the last GDC they didn't even have the idea for the Xbox, so they did all of this in less than a year.
Yeah, in a
Yeah.
year. Holy
Yeah.
shit.
I mean, that gives you a chance to show off games though at E3.
Yeah.
But, man.
But and games were in the works at this point because we'll get to that. But games were in the works, but yeah.
But this delayed everything.
Yes, this delayed. So this chip issue, for those of you that don't know, chips, processors, graphics cards, you got to design them and then you got to manufacture them. Manufacturing them takes long enough. Designing them takes long enough. You couldn't do both in 1 year.
Wow.
So,
wait,
also,
so
little
was
known
the-
fact: if
was-
you eat a bunch of them, they'll fuck up your whole mouth.
So like the OG Xbox, which was initially supposed to come out, was it supposed to come out in 2000?
It was supposed to come out in November 2000, like a month after the PlayStation 2, and then it got delayed, which at the time they didn't know, but we would eventually learn later. Instead of competing with the PlayStation 2, they ended up competing with the GameCube.
The GameCube by a
Yes.
couple days.
Because at this point,
It's
I
easy
believe
win. So
at
Yo,
this point, I
fuck
believe
off.
the GameCube was still Project Off and it wasn't announced yet.
Or as I like to call it, the best console ever made.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well,
The
I like
GameCube.
to call the Xbox. But I'm doing this episode.
I do
so
like
I can
to.
prove
You made the
wrong.
joke earlier, but I do like to believe it was Project Pearl Harbor before they.
Hold on,
There's the PS4.
I'll get there. So GDC March 2000, the Xbox was finally unveiled to the
Officially.
public. To the point where Bill Gates got on stage and said, "We have a super top secret project to show you,"
That
and
I
everybody in the
remember.
audience laughed because they all knew this
Yeah.
was coming. They didn't know it was named the Xbox, but they knew pretty much everything else about it
Sure.
already. But this was GDC, Game Developers Conference, right?
Yes.
So this was their chance to tell the public that this was coming, but also sell some game developers on this thing. Because they had been talking to game developers this whole time, but they had them all in one place, and they were going to make their pitch. So they met with a ton of game developers. Game developers were very excited about three things. They were very excited about the Ethernet port.
Yeah.
They were very excited about the hard drive. But mostly,
Definitely.
they were excited that Microsoft was willing to sit down with them and talk to them about what they wanted. At the time, Sony and Nintendo were at GDC, but it was businessmen signing deals. It wasn't programmers and engineers meeting and saying like, "Look, what'll be better for you?" Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like
It's
Nintendo
less
was
friendly.
meeting with people to make GameCube games too, but they weren't like, "Hey, what? How could we help you?" They were just like, "Yeah, you want to make a game for our platform? Sign this paper." Like,
Yeah.
So like,
because they're already established. Like Microsoft's
Yeah.
at the advantage of here
Yeah.
having a fresh console, so
No,
they can be
absolutely.
like, "Hey, fucking hook us up."
They also integrated, instead of making custom shoddy, cheap, shitty, quick tools to make games with, they integrated Visual Studio.
Okay.
Which, again, if you've downloaded a game on
Yeah,
Steam,
yeah.
you got to re-download
that.
VC redistributable. That's Visual Studio. And a lot of programmers liked Visual Studio a lot. And a lot of PC developers specifically were very happy about this decision.
They needed a killer app for this thing.
They also, well, hold on, I'll get there. They also created something that they could literally run their game and on a dev kit, and it would zoom into the individual pixel and told you what pixel was out of place. These were things that were unheard of in
So that's
development.
like got to be super
Yeah.
powerful at that
Yeah,
point
Yes.
in time.
Drew Angeloff, I don't know if I'm saying that right, was quoted as saying, "We made it uncool for platform manufacturers to ship subpar dev tools and support forever." So that's a big...
Yeah.
this is
That
getting
is
a little
yeah.
technical, but this is a big deal because
Yeah.
this
there
is
wouldn't
like...
be another shitty game
it's like-
on console until
it's-
Sneak King.
It's like Randy said later. Microsoft, as we now know, iterated on this with the Xbox 360, and Sony went in the other direction, and they fucking
Fuck.
paid for
That
it.
cell
Yeah.
And they
processor
reversed their
bullshit.
decision, and that's why the PS4 is doing so well, because they basically
Yes.
learned from the 360 that they're like, hey, we got to support these developers.
Yeah.
That night, the Xbox team had a party to celebrate. Has nothing to do with the development. This is a fun story. They all got drunk. They decided to see how many of them could fit in the elevator. 24 of them got in the elevator, which caused the elevator cables to buckle and drop 4 floors.
Oh my god!
They got
Shit,
stuck.
Tower of Terror shit.
They got stuck between 2 floors, and firemen had to pry the doors open and save them.
What the fuck did they think was gonna happen?
This is what happens when programmers and physicists get drunk.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's fuck up an elevator.
So, as Randy said before, and like I said, games were in development at this point. The aforementioned Fusion Frenzy, I'm sure, was in the works.
Woo!
As was things like Fable. They had gotten Lionhead on board.
Peter, our
Peter
boy
Molyneux,
Peter Molyneux.
our boy Peter Molyneux.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was he doing?
But Fable wasn't going to be ready for launch, as was things like Ninja Gaiden and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They needed something for this launch, and they needed something to sell, and they couldn't hype something up in time, so they had to find something that was in the works, and they had to buy it.
Oh, cue the choir.
Yes. So Microsoft had been in talks for a while with a little company from Chicago called Bungie.
Yeah. Fine makers of Marathon and Myth.
Yes, who had
Yes.
made nothing but Mac games until that point, and they had not shipped a game that sold more than like 250,000 copies.
Wow.
Like, this was a huge
Yeah,
bet. But
yeah.
Microsoft saw Halo and they were like, fucking
Saw the
yes.
potential in that.
So Microsoft acquired Bungie for $30 million.
Whoa.
This was later quoted
It's more than
by
they spent on that
multiple.
gigapixel. So.
This was quoted by many people later as being labeled the bargain of the century.
Yeah, 30 million for Bungie. What was
yeah.
that? Came on top of that. Like,
They made their money back and then some with Halo
and
1.
This is post Steve Jobs doing like the whole stage reveal of Halo, and it was okay. Go.
Yeah. So I plan to do an episode like this about the development of Halo because that's its whole crazy story.
Yeah,
but eventually
buddy.
we got Bill Gates' vengeance number 2. Steve Jobs was very angry about this move. Bungie.
He has his own special version of
Yes.
the game where the aliens
He
are
wanted
Japanese.
He wanted Bungie. He wanted Bungie to make Halo for Mac, and it was revealed at a Macworld. But he called up Bill Gates, and that was one of the first times they had talked since their famous fight early on in the days of Apple versus Windows.
Fuck.
Yeah.
And Bill Gates
nuts.
told him, "Hey man, you had your chance," and an agreement was eventually reached that Halo would come out on Mac, which I don't think it did. So
No, yeah.
but
Yeah, there was that conference. It's so funny. I've watched it on YouTube a couple
Yeah,
times
yeah,
over
it
the
is up
years.
there.
It's all like grainy footage and him showing it. It's not an FPS. They were doing it as a top-down originally, or like
It was a
not
strategy-
top-down.
it was a strategy
It was
game, man.
a 3/4
Well,
view.
you
Yeah,
could
it's
like zoom in. And
Yeah,
We'll get to
3/4
all
view.
of this.
Yeah, okay.
There's
But
a lot
that,
of
yeah,
Halo
we'll save
episodes
that for the
saved
Halo
up here,
episode.
but
Yeah,
it's very interesting story of how
Yeah.
Halo came to be. But essentially, people were already very excited about Halo. And when Microsoft announced the only place you can play this is the Xbox.
only on Xbox. as the
Only on
stamp
Xbox.
says.
Dude,
Yeah.
Boom.
Nintendo had the little diamond one that said only.
People
4
were
games.
like, "Oh shit, they're serious. Like this is going to be a thing." So around this time, around GDC time, when the Xbox was launched, the Xbox was announced. The PlayStation 2 was launched in Japan. The PlayStation 2 was launched in March 2000 in Japan. It was launched
months to get it here.
October 2000 in the US. But essentially, Microsoft then learned that
It's a big lead on the Xbox to the launch.
20 months. PlayStation 2 would be on the market 20 months before the Xbox.
Jeez, it's almost
Which is
2
a
years.
lot of time.
That's a lot
Yeah,
of
it's a
time.
huge amount of
That's
time.
a lot of time to build up a library. So now they had to sell people on this as opposed to the PlayStation, which was going to have some big games.
Yeah, it's
by the time.
different than nowadays where you can hop into the console world and have your pick of the litter, you know?
This was also around the time that Nintendo had announced Project Dolphin would be called the Nintendo GameCube,
Dolphin.
and that it would launch in fall of 2001.
Specifically, 3 days before the GameCube, right? Or was it after? No, it was
Xbox?
after. It was November.
You said
18th.
GameCube released
This is
in
of
fall
2001. November.
So
2001.
at this time, I don't think that either
They
of
had
them
a
had
specific
specific
date?
dates.
Gotcha. They,
But-
but Xbox and
Same
GameCube
holiday
said fall.
season, though.
Yeah.
I don't think Xbox didn't have a date.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Nintendo had given a date. Xbox knew they were aiming for fall 2001,
Okay.
but
The
it
GameCube
wasn't
is the
final.
15th,
It wasn't
isn't it?
final
Yeah.
yet. Okay.
Okay.
So, flash forward a little while.
2001, baby.
Uh,
Whoa, wait. Nope, that's gonna get.
yeah. So flash forward a while. Microsoft had announced the Xbox, but they didn't really show it at E3,
Yeah.
which had people a little worried. Because as we know, the thing wasn't done.
yeah.
The console couldn't be shown at E3 because it didn't exist yet. But people knew, like, from Sony and Nintendo, they're like, oh, this thing is
a sweet
a year
logo,
and a
though.
half out. It's probably done by now. They have to be manufacturing. Microsoft's like, no.
Yeah.
But flash forward from March 2000 all the way to January 2001. A lot of behind-the-scenes kind of boring work was being done on the Xbox.
Yeah.
A lot of games were
Crunch
in development.
time.
Yeah, a lot of games were in development. Your Fusion Frenzies, your what the fuck was Armed and Dangerous, that terrible game, Brute Force. But Halo also.
Right.
And at CES 2001, Bill Gates got on stage with our good friend Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Woo! This is in Vegas.
Yeah,
right.
in
yeah,
Vegas.
There's videos of this out there
to
too.
show the power of the Xbox.
You gotta watch find those videos. They're
Yeah.
They teamed.
I've seen
Yeah, Bill Gates was called a nerd by The Rock,
He
I
was,
believe.
I
He
do
made
remember
fun of
that.
him. I believe this is also where Bill Gates was quoted as saying, "Fusion Frenzy is my favorite game ever." Or
That
something
is
like
where
that.
I got a
Yeah.
lot of those jokes
Yeah.
from, for sure.
So the demos were received pretty well. Halo being a standout. Here's the thing. Halo was running on Windows, wasn't running on an Xbox.
Oh, wow.
Xbox
That's pretty funny.
still wasn't done, and a lot of those demos were pre-rendered.
Apparently, Halo was also a big surprise because at some of the first private showings before that, the response wasn't nearly as positive just because the game was so early in development.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was like when Halo was like becoming what Halo is now.
Yeah.
A company called Blur Studios, who you may know, makes a lot of those really awesome pre-rendered cutscenes that sell people on games that end up sucking, like that Dead Island trailer.
Oh, wow.
I actually enjoyed Dead Island.
Yeah. Like that old
I enjoyed that
remember
trailer.
that Old Republic trailer that they
Yeah,
announced?
that was not at all
Oh, yeah,
like,
nothing like that game.
like the actual game.
This was all
That's a
Blur.
dope
Their whole
trailer.
thing is making trailers to sell people on games that aren't done yet. And they
And now
existed.
the
Yes, they're
singer,
good
he
at their
started the
job.
Gorillas, right? Like shortly after that.
But they were still around back then. But yeah, people were like, okay, Microsoft, I see where you're going with this.
Sure,
I'm
yeah,
interested. And behind the scenes, the company was scrambling. NVIDIA didn't have the chip designed yet, and manufacturing had not yet begun, which was unheard of. Here's a great quote I'm going to read from Ed Fries, head of Microsoft Game Studios. He says, "I'm excited. We have an epic battle. You have the world's largest software company fighting the world's largest consumer electronics company and arguably the world's largest toy company. And they're all spending billions of dollars to push this business forward. I couldn't be more excited." So, yeah. He's like,
Optimistic
games are
there.
getting big, get ready.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And he was
we got-
right. That generation.
Yeah.
It's cool because nobody benefited more, I think, in some sort of multi-billion-dollar industry. I guess food, but like nobody, like entertainment-wise, like I think we all benefited the most.
No,
from
absolutely.
it. Like absolutely.
That was
you know?
the prime age for us.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think that's kind of where we are at now. We see Sony still not doing that, but like Nintendo and Microsoft and all them are kind of like now they're just like, yo, consumers just we're in this together. Like as much as we're competing,
Totally.
we're in
There's
this
a level
together.
of competitive but camaraderie going on still.
Okay, so NVIDIA got the chips done. Manufacturing had started. Some prototypes were built. Flash forward, June 2001, E3. Microsoft got on stage.
Price and date dropped.
Yes, they announced $299, same as the PS2. And November 2001, same as the GameCube. Same launch as the GameCube.
Which was really crazy. 3 days is nuts. Like I know the PS4 and the Xbox One launched a week apart, but from the 15th to the 18th, what was it like working at a GameStop back then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Babbage's.
It's just Electronics
so-
Boutique. Funko.
So they tried to turn their demo Xbox on during the presentation. It failed.
Oh yeah, I know about that.
ain't that the way?
All they wanted to do was show that cool intro that we were talking about this whole time, the nuclear energy
Yeah.
thing. The console failed. They ended up
Fucking
having
bummer.
to play a video of the thing. They let the press play some of these games, but the console wasn't done. The console was quoted at running at about a third of its final power.
Wow,
And so the show was kind of a disaster
that's a bummer.
for Microsoft. And at the same time, Sony had announced that they had sold 10 million PS2s already.
What
and
demos did they have there?
Metal Gear
you-
Solid 2, Final Fantasy
Oh yeah,
10.
that was the talk of the fucking town.
Yeah.
Those two,
And I
fucking-
believe GTA 3 also.
Jesus.
Like the three big ones.
Yeah, and that was the age when I started paying attention to E3 in general.
Yeah.
but
I
like,
love it's just like, oh, your conference failed.
well, that's the thing. Like, I assume
10 million in sales.
I assume
Hold
at the
on.
Xbox event they're showing like Dead or Alive 3 or Oddworld or maybe a
So-
Madden or Project Gotham or something.
So
They had
this-
that weird Tony Hawk 2 thing.
I'm going to try
2X.
to put sources with this episode because there's a lot. There's a great article by VentureBeat that I got a lot of this information from. And I'm going to quote them directly because I couldn't come up with something like this. Apparently Randy can, but I can't come up with something like this. The quote from the VentureBeat article. At E3, it seemed like Microsoft had brought a knife to a gunfight. Microsoft was hoping for the battle at Midway, and instead they got Pearl Harbor. Okay, so June 2001. Flash forward a couple months. Things are wrapping up with production on the Xbox. Games are getting ready. Everybody's crunching. Boom. 9/11
Favorite holiday.
happens.
Oh, sorry. That's not-
Wait, what happened?
9/11 happened.
Yeah, but what happened on 9/11?
Dude, are you serious?
No.
All right, so some terrorists. No. So, and Microsoft was very worried. And everybody at Microsoft had good intentions, but basically that was a weird time for businesses because everybody's like, shit, what do we do? Basically, Microsoft was like, fuck, how do we market games now?
Yeah.
They're like,
yeah, especially since
people are
they
not
used an Xbox
in the mood
as
for-
a mock bomb
Yeah.
on one of the planes. That's why Microsoft took a lot of hits.
people were not, are people going to be in the mood to play games? The argument within
You think escapism for kids would maybe be the opposite.
Yeah.
But,
Well, the argument in the company was like, should we delay this? Are people in the mood for games right now? And then people are like, well, people need distractions now more than ever.
Right,
And it's like, but a lot of markets right after 9/11 dried up.
that's true.
But like, but the market was there. PS2 was still selling. And by the time
I mean, I assume Nintendo still said they
9/11's
were
effect
going
on the
to,
market
but-
lasted a very long time, as we now know, but not long, like not harsh enough that it really
It
affected
delayed
video
GTA
games.
3 a month.
Yes,
the
it
biggest
did.
tragedy.
Yeah. Oh God.
I take that joke back. I'm sorry.
But here's the kicker. Microsoft, Toys R Us, RIP, was opening a store in
Pour one
Times
out.
Square.
Yeah, pull one out.
And their opening day was also going to be the launch of the Xbox.
Wow, in Times Square, too.
Microsoft had rented out Time fucking Square to launch this thing.
Jeez.
And now New York was a sensitive place.
Yeah.
But noted asshole Mayor Rudy Giuliani insisted that Microsoft continue. He wanted,
Did something right.
we're strong, we'll get through this, show those terrorists that we can still play video games. I don't know what his message was, but
yeah. My one credit is making the people of New York feel slightly better after 9/11. And then after that, 95%
I
of my
know that
life
day
is
was
horse
really
shit.
bad, but y'all ever play Halo?
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
yeah, so, but things went on as planned. The Xbox launched.
Hey.
Bill Gates, you've probably seen the famous picture of Bill Gates shaking the hand of the guy that bought the
Yes.
first Xbox.
I remember that.
They gave out fucking green and white Krispy Kreme donuts to everybody. Seamus Blackley, one of the head guys that's been there since the beginning, Bill Gates bought a ring for him to propose to his wife on the spot
Oh my
that
God.
night.
That's pretty cool.
There were some celebrities there.
Any bands? Usually
I
they got
don't
bands.
know, but they were worried about attendance. Thousands of people showed up.
Yeah.
So the whole night was kind of a success. So I just wanted to talk about the Xbox up until its launch. This podcast would be hours and hours and hours long if I was to go into the Xbox proper.
360.
Yeah.
Or as I like to call it, the 360, the actual best console ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jokes
Yes.
aside.
Well,
So
we always have time in the future.
die
we can
hugging
deep,
a-
we
I'll
can,
die hugging a
You know,
GameCube,
we can
though.
deep dive back into Microsoft
might-
and Xbox
No,
in the
absolutely.
future.
I
yeah.
might do. I plan on doing a Halo episode in the future, which crosses over a lot with the story that we just told.
Yeah.
And I might do an Xbox 360 feature feature because the 360's kind of a continuation of this, and that's
And its
kind of
influence is
that's
so
kind of
monumental.
like everything I said here didn't really pan out all that well for Microsoft.
They hit their, yeah.
They got there, but the three
It was pretty outsold.
But these decisions,
PS2.
like Chris said, were so forward thinking.
Yeah.
That like the 360 was just like put up to bat, ready to
Yeah.
hit a home run because
Yeah,
Microsoft
exactly.
Microsoft took the loss on the Xbox, the original Xbox, and then knocked it out of the park with the 360 because
Totally.
they iterated on it.
Yeah.
But, you know,
they
I mean,
walked-
it's like
yeah.
Halo turned out
Yeah.
to be the,
So-
yeah, like a,
So conclusion, Xbox hit its sales targets. It didn't exactly sell all that well. PlayStation still had a huge market share, arguably even bigger than the PlayStation 1 days. PlayStation 2 was huge.
People like to call the
PlayStation. I
well,
didn't have
that's
an
the thing.
Xbox One.
PS2 was so big. Like people like to call the
sorry.
GameCube and the Xbox a failure, but they really weren't at all. It was
No.
just the PS2 was just.
It was huge. Everybody had one. It was an incredible console,
Yeah.
dude.
But that fan base for the Xbox was really born.
Yes.
then. Yeah.
I did.
But-
I had 3 Xboxes. I went through 3.
Yeah.
Because they just
The
broke.
originals?
They suck. Yeah.
But-
I had. I
Did you
was
have a Mountain Dew one?
No.
was
Just
one.
3 of the regular like old black ones.
Yeah, Xbox hit some sales targets, but they were significantly outsold by the PlayStation 2, and they didn't fucking really care because Nintendo was too. And their whole thought was like, if Nintendo can get beat this bad by Sony, then maybe we're not doing something so wrong. Because they're like, the GameCube's a good console, and even it's happening to them. So
both of them more powerful than the PS2.
But they gained a loyal fan base of Xbox fans, yours truly included.
Xbox Live.
Yeah, Xbox Live was huge.
Fucking the
set the
most
stage for
important thing,
everything that's happening right now.
Oh, yeah, it was
Halo changed first-person shooters on consoles.
Yeah.
You had things like GoldenEye, but like after Halo, that was like
yeah,
the
GoldenEye.
fucking thing for consoles was to get first-person shooters.
Yeah. And you think about everything from just achievements to like the incorporating things like other brands like Netflix and stuff into it, and just the friends like having a active social like element to it. It was
and like
really
I said, a lot of decisions that were made with the Xbox paved the way for the smash hit console, arguably probably the biggest console other than the PS2, the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
So
there it is.
that's the end of the story.
That's the end of the story.
Fucking A.
For now.
Yeah.
For now, yeah.
And
We can still go into Xbox Live a little bit more too when we
Yeah.
get down to that, because that's incredible.
I'll actually go into Xbox Live a little bit more with
The
Halo.
Halo one.
Yeah, because Xbox
I'd like
Live
to
is
hear
such
about
a
Xbox
huge
Live,
fucking deal. That changed gaming.
Oh,
dude.
absolutely. But that was that's it, everybody. That was the story about that was our tale about how
story
little
of
Bill
Lion
Gates
King.
could.
Yeah.
That was the story of
yeah.
the Lion King. Seriously, that was super interesting stuff. It really is a fascinating story, and thank you so much for doing all that research for us and reading it today. That was
It's like
Respect,
kind of
really
it's like
amazing.
respect your elders.
It is, yeah.
A lot of people make fun of the original Xbox, but we wouldn't be where we are without
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
So
you kind of did a little bit better than Randall. I think we should get rid of him, actually.
I was about to thank you guys, but
what the fuck did I do?
but no, thank obviously everybody for listening to us today, and come back again next week when the three of us will be back with a different topic about something else significant in the world of games.
Yeah, that's the story.
This was Hot Button, and our host today, Austin Blakesley.
Yeah, that's my boy.
I'm Randall
Yep.
Beatrice, and that's it. No one else.
Well, fuck you. Chris Antoine, Chris I something on Twitter.
You burned me. I was only taking a shot at you in response. But yeah, follow me at Restart Randy. And,
Austin Blakesley.
Yeah, and Hot Button Cast.
Hot Button Cast. But take care, everybody.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.